It was a Friday night, and the crisp autumn air crackled with anticipation. A party deep in the woods. A chance to escape the confines of college life. The lure of the unknown was too strong to resist. I received a crumpled flyer, passed down through the crowded student union. That night, there was going to be a bonfire to let loose and temporarily forget about homework. My friends and I, eager for a reprieve from the mounting pressure of midterms, piled into my beat-up Honda Civic. We were young, invincible, and ready to chase the night away. Little did we know the secluded path we were about to embark on would lead us to a night we would never forget. A night forever etched in our memories, shrouded in fear and unanswered questions. As we turned onto Old Crow Road, a desolate path that snaked its way into the heart of the woods, a wave of unease washed over me. I tried to shake off the feeling, attributing it to the spooky season and the isolation of our surroundings. The further we drove, the denser the woods became. The air grew heavy, thick with the smell of damp earth and decaying leaves. We had been driving for what felt like hours, the party still frustratingly out of reach. The windows had fogged up because of the thick humidity. Just when our impatience was about to get the best of us, the road took a sharp incline. We finally got over the hill, and there was a clearing where we could see the light of the bonfire. A wave of relief washed over me. We had made it. Or so we thought. As we approached the clearing, a figure emerged from the tree line. It was my friend Mark, along with a couple of others from our dorm. They were walking towards us, their faces barely visible in the darkness. "Hey, what are you guys doing out here?" I called out, rolling down the window. "The party's that way." I pointed further down the road. Mark approached the car, a strange look on his face. It was a mixture of anxiety and something else I couldn't quite place. "We're out of beer," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Headed into town to grab some more." "Seriously?" I laughed, surprised by their urgency. "They have beer at the party, you can't wait a couple of hours?" He shook his head, avoiding my gaze. "We need to get going. Be back soon." And with that, he turned and disappeared back into the trees, his companions following close behind. I found it odd that they refused our offer of a ride. Their haste and Mark's strange demeanor left me feeling uneasy. As we watched them go, a sound drifted through the still night air. It was faint at first, barely audible above the rustling of leaves. But as it grew louder, I recognized the unmistakable opening chords of Bob Segar's Turn the Page. The music seemed to be coming from deep within the woods, its melancholy melody at odds with the supposed celebratory atmosphere of the party. The encounter on the hill stayed with me as we finally reached the party. The music, the beer, the bonfire, none of it could fully erase the image of Mark's face, etched with an anxiety I couldn't shake. There was something definitely wrong. The song, Turn the Page, seemed to follow me throughout the night, its haunting melody weaving itself into every conversation, every burst of laughter. I tried to brush it off, to lose myself in the moment, but a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The woods, which had seemed so inviting earlier, now felt oppressive, closing in on us. I kept replaying our encounter with Mark in my head, wondering what was so urgent that they had to leave the party so abruptly and on foot. Why was his car so far away from the party? And why did they refuse our offer of a ride? The questions lingered in the back of my mind, casting a shadow over the night's festivities. Little did I know those unanswered questions would soon take on a chilling significance. 3 days later, the harsh knocking on my dorm room door jolted me awake. It was early, way too early for any of my friends to be paying a visit. Rubbing the sleep from my eyes, I stumbled towards the door, my heart pounding in my chest. 2 men in plainclothes stood in the hallway. They flashed their badges, their faces grim. "We're here about the party last Friday night," one of them said, his voice devoid of emotion. "We need to ask you some questions." My blood ran cold. The party. Mark. The strange feeling that had haunted me ever since that night. It all came rushing back in a terrifying wave. I invited them in, my mind racing, trying to piece together what had happened. They asked about the drive to the party, about the people I saw, about anything unusual I might have witnessed. When I mentioned our encounter with Mark and his friends on the hill, their faces hardened. They exchanged a look, a silent communication that sent shivers down my spine. "Can you tell us more about this encounter?" the other detective asked, his voice low and steady. I recounted the details of that night, the strange urgency in Mark's voice, the eerie sound of "turn the page" drifting through the trees. As I spoke, I could see the tension in their faces grow. "There was an accident that night," one of the detectives finally said, breaking the heavy silence. "An accident?" I repeated, my heart sinking. "A car went off the road just past the hill where you saw your friends," he continued, his voice devoid of emotion. "Dead." The word hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I thought of Mark, his face pale in the moonlight, his voice a strained whisper. Could it have been him? The thought sent a wave of nausea through me. "We believe there was someone else in the car," the other detective said, his eyes boring into mine. "A passenger, but they fled the scene before we arrived." The room seemed to spin. Someone else in the car, but who? Why would they run? "We found this at the scene," one of the detectives said, placing a plastic evidence bag on the table. Inside, I could make out a familiar object, a crumpled pack of cigarettes, the same brand that Mark always smoked. I stared at the cigarettes, my mind reeling. If Mark was the driver, who was the passenger? And why did they run? Were they involved in the accident? Or were they running from something? The questions swirled in my head, a chaotic storm of fear and uncertainty. The detectives continued their questioning, but my thoughts were a million miles away, lost in a maze of possibilities, each one more terrifying than the last. The days that followed the detectives' visit were a blur of fear and uncertainty. The news of the accident spread through the campus like wildfire, whispered in hushed tones in the hallways, debated in hushed voices in the library. Rumors swirled, fueled by speculation and fear. Some said the driver was drunk. Others whispered about foul play, about a fight that had escalated, about a dark secret hidden beneath the surface of that fateful night. But no one seemed to know for sure what really happened on that desolate stretch of road. The police continued their investigation, but the case remained unsolved. We never got our questions answered. Every few weeks, the detectives would return, their questions like shards of glass, cutting through the fragile piece I had managed to cobble together. They asked about that night, about Mark, about the missing passenger. They searched for a clue, a piece of the puzzle that would unlock the truth. But their efforts seemed futile, lost in the labyrinth of unanswered questions. As the weeks turned into months, a heavy weight of guilt settled upon me. Had I missed something that night? Could I have done something, anything, to prevent the tragedy? The questions haunted me, relentless and unforgiving. I replayed our encounter with Mark on the hill countless times, each time searching for a sign, a clue, something I might have overlooked. His anxious face, his hurried words, the haunting melody of "turn the page." They were all pieces of a puzzle I couldn't quite assemble. I couldn't shake the feeling that I held a piece of the puzzle, a fragment of the truth that could unlock the mystery of that night. But no matter how hard I tried, the memory remained elusive, shrouded in a fog of fear and uncertainty. Years have passed since that fateful night. The party, the hill, the haunting melody of "turn the page," they have all become distant memories. But the questions remain, as vivid and unsettling as ever. Who was the passenger in the car that night? Why did they run? And what really happened on that desolate stretch of road beneath the watchful gaze of the silent woods? The answers, like whispers in the wind, continue to elude me. The mystery of the hill party remains unsolved, a chilling reminder of the fragility of life and the enduring power of the unknown. It is a story that continues to haunt me, a haunting melody that plays on a loop in the corridors of my memory, forever reminding me that some questions are destined to remain unanswered.